Welcome to Bazza's podcast, brought to you by Barry York from the land down under. We discuss popular culture, history and politics. Our motto is, question everything. Peter Gelling was a multi-instrumentalist musician who excelled in guitar, harmonica and piano, and an excellent composer, producer, songwriter, arranger, music teacher and innovator. Rolling Stone magazine described his guitar playing as shimmering. He released 5 critically acclaimed albums, including the ARIA-nominated Bluestime and multi-award-winning album Fortune. He's remembered in Canberra mainly for his great blues band called Blind Freddy. I knew Peter from 1990 up until his passing in 2018 at the age of 58. Peter was a deep thinker, a lover of literature and poetry, and a gentle and modest man. He was quite obsessive about his music, which brought him much joy in life. For 5 years, from the age of 13, Peter was an alcoholic. He said he was saved by Alcoholics Anonymous, by the support of special people in his life, and by music, and of course by his own determination. He was dry for 40 years and helped many other recovering alcoholics and addicts during that time. He saved lives. As a musician, he was recognised internationally through the instruction books that were translated into 4 languages. He wrote more than 130 instructional books covering many instruments and styles, and he came second in the blues category of the famous Nashville International Songwriting Competition. His books on blues guitar even sold well in America itself. In this podcast, which is based on an oral history interview with Peter recorded for the National Library in 1995, Peter talks about his music, how he became involved in music, and the influences on his musical direction. Among his many legacies was his role as a mentor for young female musicians. In cooperation with a local cafe in Canberra called Tilly's, he designed a mentoring program called Taking the Stage, which encouraged young women to form bands and take up instruments not usually played by women. The interview held at the National Library totals about 8 hours in all, so I've had to leave out a lot of his remarkable story in this podcast. His life was enhanced by music and his many friends and family, and by his special relationship with his wife, Leslie, and stepdaughter, Josie. He had battled his demons and was an inspirational figure to many people.
I had a very good imagination. I was always a daydreamer and great fantasy mind, and so I love reading books and escaping into the fantasy world. When I was 9, when the last year before we moved to Canberra, my parents decided to get guitar lessons. For some reason they decided they needed a hobby and they were going to learn the guitar, so they had 2 guitars, and they decided to get me to learn it too. And that was for about 3 months. And at the end of that year, 1969, we moved to Canberra. And unfortunately they didn't find another guitar teacher in Canberra, so I now wish they had. But because I loved it, I really enjoyed it. So I didn't develop it, but I went to stay on a farm in, the holidays in 1971, the Christmas holidays, I think, with relatives out at West Wyalong, out in the country, west of here. and they had a piano. They lived in the town, but they also had a farm out of town, and each day we'd go out to the farm. And I used to enjoy it. But every day going back from the farm, there'd be a few hours before dinner, and I'd go in there and muck around on the piano. I didn't know anything about pianos, or I just loved the sound of it, and I tried to pick out tunes. My father had a harmonica, which he hardly ever played, and occasionally I used to pick that up and try and make up a tune. And I learned how to, by ear, pick out a few folk tunes, Botany Bay and The Happy Wanderer, and just songs like that. I think the first couple of years in Canberra I played in the school's brass band, playing the cornet, but I used to get lots of cold sores, so I gave that up. That was when I was 13, and that was when I started getting into drugs and drinking, and I just sort of lost touch with it, really, till I was 16. And I found one of these old guitars at home that had been sitting there since we'd moved, in a cupboard or something. I don't know why I hadn't picked them up, but I hadn't. And I started trying to pick out a few tunes. My parents had some younger friends who came that were visitors to Canberra, and they came here and the woman played the guitar. So she wrote out some chords for me, so I went in, got this old guitar out and tuned it up and by out of a book, and started learning these chords. And I'd just muck around on it occasionally. But it wasn't until I was 18 that I started trying to learn it, and from then on I just did it all the time.
Why do you think the blues music means so much to you?
I've thought about that an awful lot. I think in the beginning it was just the sound and the feeling of it, and I didn't really understand why intellectually I liked it. I just liked it because I felt it. Over the years I have thought about that a lot, and I think there's various elements. The most important one is that it's just an honest outcry of human experience in the beginning, and that attracts me. In any folk music, any art, any writing, I'm not attracted to cleverness. I'm attracted to honest human experience, and if there happens to be cleverness in with that as well, then I like that too. I'm intellectually fascinated because I do analyse stuff myself. But initially I'm not attracted to cleverness, I'm attracted to the other side of it, and blues is just that. But the more I've tried to study it, the more I've recognised that there's a hell of a lot of cleverness in it too, but it's an unconscious thing. It's just because the people that invented the music had no formal education. And if you've got a fair amount of intelligence, that's going to get used somehow. And if it's not in a formal way, then it's going to create its own genius in another way. And that's what's happened in blues. And I love things in any art which appear simple, but they're very complex at the same time. Things that are too complex, I think, don't work properly. Anything that's really going to work has to be simple. But if it's just simple, it sometimes doesn't work. It's sort of like, it's so clever that it's unseen. It's like the thing about the art is in concealing the art. So I think that's in blues. I've heard people say, blues is boring, it's so simple. And yet, if you ask them to play it, they can't play it. They can play an arrogant, ignorant approximation, but they can't play blues. Because it's the phrasing, it's the rhythm, it's the inflections, it's the dynamics, it's the feeling, it's everything. And unless you get all those things in there, you're not going to be able to do it right. So it's got enough in it for me to be fascinated with and keep trying to get and keep working at, but at the same time it's got that just immediate feeling in it. And the other thing is that it comes out of oppression. And I can say with my childhood, I'd be ridiculous to compare what I went through to what the slaves went through. That'd be a stupid thing to do, but there's an element of it. As a young child, if you're in a bad situation, you're going to grow up a certain way. And when you hear music that came out of an experience that you as a little child felt any sort of similarity to, I think you're going to be drawn to it. Well, there's been a lot of things. Being an alcoholic, of having ME. You know, there's constant frustration with my life. There's a deep, desperate frustration about being sick and not being able to live normally, which I can't express, but it comes out through music. And if I hear someone singing like that or playing like that, especially one of those authentic black blues performers, I just feel it as much as I ever did. I mean, now that's the reasons I see myself that I'm attracted to it. But in the beginning, I just felt it. I would really like to be able to go back to America to hear blues in its environment where it was created. I went to America, but really I didn't know much about the music then. I'd love to go back knowing what I know now. And also to hear the other stuff, like there's so much other music that I really like. Gee, I didn't mention it before, but all the black music, the funk, New Orleans, R&B, soul, all that stuff, I love a lot of that. Mind you, there's some of it that I don't like, but a lot of it I really like, and I'd love to go there and hear all that. I'd love to go to New Orleans and hear the piano players, and they're still playing like Professor Longhair, and I'd love to go into a Chicago place and hear someone playing like Otis Spann, and hear someone playing the stuff like, well, Buddy Guy's still there, you know, but someone on the street playing that style, like, you hear about it that there's awful lots of people everywhere that actually play it, but for me it's a bit like learning a language. You can get, say if I was going to learn Italian, I can get a book on how to learn Italian, I can get tapes on how to speak Italian, and I'll get it to a certain extent, but unless I go to Italy and live there for a while, I'm not going to get it really as authentically as I'd like. And that's how I feel about my own playing. When I started playing the guitar, when I was 16, I was at Dixon College, and there was a kid there who had an older brother that collected lots of records, and he had a record of Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee, and I heard this kid. We were stoned one day, and he started singing this song, and I said, "Oh, what's that?" And he said, "Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee," and I'd never heard of them. So anyway, one day we wagged school and went to his place, and he played me this record of Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee, and I thought it was great. You know, here's this harmonica with someone bending notes and the really emotional singing, and talk about melodic. You know, it was really melodic music, basic lyrics about life, not fancy songs about something. One thing that I still don't like, that I've never liked that much, is show songs and musicals. A lot of jazz players love to improvise on show tunes, things written by Jerome Kern or Cole Porter or people like that. I'll enjoy playing, you know, and improvising on some of those tunes sometimes. Like, for example, Summertime, I love that.
Oh, yeah,
by Gershwin. In fact, a lot of Gershwin stuff I like, because he's gone into the black side of the American music more than most of those people. Most of the show composers will write cliches about black life, and we'll put a few black music cliches in there, but their heart's not in that music. They're very well off, good time Broadway writers, and I can't relate to them at all. One thing that attracted me to blues immediately was that they were songs about everyday life. They had intensity in them. They were about hardship. They weren't actually about the oppression of black people, because in blues, mostly it came from the South. And if you sang about being oppressed by whites, you'd probably end up dead for singing that song.
Yes.
So there's very few blues songs about the oppression. There's some. I can think of J.B. Lenoir has an album called Alabama Blues, and he talks about how they shot his brothers and sisters, and they used to round people up and put them behind wire and stuff like this, and one of the very few examples of them talking about that stuff. But the emotion from all that happening was in the music, and there was that cry in the music, that intensity, as well as a great melodic sense, as well as the growling, the bending, and just the rhythm, the rhythm of the music, and the fact that you could use a guitar in it, You could learn 3 chords and you could play an imitation of it. I didn't know much about music then. I thought, no, blues, 1, 4 and 5. A, E and B, B7. I knew those chords. I had a bit of trouble with B7, but most of those simple chords. No, I used to play blues in A, actually, because you can play A, D and E, and they're fairly easy. So I'd play these, what I thought was a good imitation, but it was a bad imitation of blues at the time. And I liked it. And I always, with the guitar, I'd play my Bob Dylan and Neil Young songs, and then I'd make up a song, and it was always a 12-bar blues. So years later, when I decided that I was going to specialise in blues, I found that to use a cliche, my spiritual roots were there anyway. And I'd always loved it. So I heard Sonny Terry, Brownie McGee, and then I heard a few other people, B.B. King and ones like that. So I had some friends who were living close to where I lived, and they had some blues records among others, and they had Willie Dixon and Memphis Slim, which I loved, the piano, the Memphis Slim piano, and Willie Dixon's voice and his lyrics, and he's got humour. They also had Mahalia Jackson, who was a great gospel singer, and the intensity in her voice and the passion in the way she sang and meant what she sang. I just loved that straight away. It wasn't blues. It was gospel music, but as I've heard black performers say, one say baby and the other one say Jesus. The music's the same. It's just the lyrics that have changed. There, in fact, Margie Evans, who's a black American singer, she was talking about how her mother and the people in the church used to say the blues was the devil's music, but she couldn't tell the difference. She's a blues singer now, but she's very religious, and she says they were singing the same thing in church. They were singing blues in church. They just weren't calling it blues because it had religious words. So what I heard from Mahalia Jackson was a blues sound and a blues approach. But because she was a religious person, she sang those things. But there was one song in particular that she used to sing, which I loved, called I'm Going to Live the Life I Sing About in My Song. And the title says what the song's about. It's about putting your money where your mouth is, walking the talk, just doing what you stand for, what you say you stand for. That song in itself was a motivation to me to try and not say one thing and do the other. And I still use that as a motivation now. It's hard to do, but I do. And I just love that song. And Mahalia Jackson's still one of my favourite singers, if not my favourite all-time singer. Buddy Guy and Junior Wells was another one that they had. And that was the first time I really heard electric blues. I had heard B.B. King with his electric guitar with a band, with a horn section. That's more of an uptown sort of sound. But Buddy Guy and Junior Wells was Chicago blues, electric blues, and I loved it. I just thought it was great. It's a lifetime study for me. I'll never stop studying music. I'll never stop studying black American music. I now learn lots about funk bass playing, for example, New Orleans piano, for example. They're not necessarily just blues, but it's coming from that whole same area. And just from a feeling point of view of reading all these biographies and reading all these books and seeing videos, to actually go there, I'd love it. Because I feel like from the position of two things, one of being an alcoholic and then recovering, and then even more than that, of being someone who had the chronic fatigue really badly and being able to do virtually nothing, to having dragged myself up out of that. No one else did it. The government didn't help me to do it. They were going to cut my pension off. I'm pretty happy with what I've been able to achieve, but I'm also never satisfied. See, I've had this thing in my mind on and off all the time. Oh, well, for someone with that, you've done pretty well. And for me, that's no good. That's an excuse. You can't be, oh well, for someone with. You've just got to be good. So I want to prove to myself that I can get to be outstanding and I can do things that a lot of people don't get to do, to prove myself worthwhile musically to myself, and to be honestly satisfied that I've given everything as good a go as I possibly can. I mean, I have to live within my limits, but within them I have to honestly do as much as I possibly can to achieve as much as I can.
Now, apart from blues music, what are your other musical tastes?
I've got a lot of different musical tastes. I like a lot of classical music, particularly piano music at the moment. Bach's my favourite classical composer. I mean, if you want to get into it technically, there's all different labels there. He's more a Baroque composer, and then Mozart's classical, and then Chopin's romantic. But save the complications, I'll just call it all classical for now. Bach is my favourite of those composers because I just think he's a genius. He's somebody worked out with a computer the skill it would take to write one of Bach's fugues, and it was something like being able to play 29 games of chess simultaneously. But apart from the mathematical side of it like that, it's just beautiful sound. So he's able to do the really complex things, but able to do them in a great musical way. Everything makes such perfect sense, harmonically, melodically, rhythmically, and it's just inspiring music to listen to. I really like Mozart, Beethoven, Chopin. Chopin's definitely one of my favourite piano composers. There's some of the modern 20th century classical music that I really like too. A lot of it's not in a straight major or minor key. It's completely atonal, some of it. Some of it's not atonal. Some of that I really like, and some of it I hate too. But it goes down, to me, with all music, to the individual musician or composer. I can't really say, I like this style of music but not that style, because I tend to like specific performers or composers. In general, I'm not that keen on heavy metal, say, and all its variations, like death metal and speed thrash, and they've got all different names for them, and half of that's a gimmick, but that's industrial noise, basically. There are exceptions. There's some really, really good musicians in heavy metal too, but it's not to my taste. There's a lot of rock I'm not that keen on, because rock has grown out of the black music in America, and a lot of it is fairly simple rhythmically compared to that, say. It's got a harder driving beat, there's less syncopation. Basically, it takes a lot less skill to play it, most of it, and it gets nearly all the credit and all the hype about who's great and whatever, and it turns me right off. But there's individual bands and performers that do great things with rock. Say Pink Floyd, for example. I love some of their stuff. In fact, while I think about it, there's probably a few songs by different performers that have really influenced my life. I'd say Time by Pink Floyd would be one of those for sure, because the song is actually about people wasting their time just hanging around doing nothing or having a good time while they're young, and then realising time's passed them by and trying to catch time up while they're getting older, and it's too late. Luckily, I was sober by the time I was 18, and I had already liked Pink Floyd, and I'd listen to that song and I'd think, well, there's something in that. I'm not going to do that. And Leonard Cohen, he's another one. I love his songwriting. He's great. A lot of people hate him, but I think he's a genius with words. He's just brilliant. And also he's onto things. He's onto real issues. I'd say he's been an influence in my songwriting, not that I write like him, but in the way it makes me think about things. So, like, he's got this song called Last Year's Man, and there's a thing in it where he says, some women wait for Jesus and some women wait for Cain, so I hang upon my altar and I hoist my axe again. And I think he's summed up a lot in that. I think it's really clever. He just says things in such a great way. A lot of his songs are sad, but they're really insightful about the human condition, and they're really kind. And I think when he's savage on himself. Okay, I'm just going to play a couple of things. I've got my amplifier set up and my electric guitar. My favourite sound is this electric guitar played quietly with just the natural sound of the amplifier. A lot of times you hear it turned up very loud. I actually like it to like an acoustic level, but played on an electric, and particularly the older stuff, which was the early Chicago blues, like the Delta blues, which was played on acoustic guitars, amplified. Yes, I'll play a bit of my interpretation of that is, which is what I like to play.
Great, yeah, really good, Pete. Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, thanks, Barry. Yeah, I'd like just, playing in that style.
All the music used in the interludes in this podcast were the work of Peter Gelling. Vocal parts were by Doug Williams. Peter's albums can be heard on Spotify.